Grangemouth in business. Also tonight, tackling the rising cost of energy bills, the government says it will review green taxes. The British Connection. The BBC identifies 50 people with links to the terror group behind the Kenyan shopping mall attack. The spider invasion that's closed down a school in Gloucestershire. It's one of the most dangerous species found in Britain. Prince George's christening, a gathering of the royal family and the 7 godparents.
On BBC London, the government's benefits cap doesn't work in the capital, the study claiming it won't save taxpayers' money. And 2 men in their 30s fall to their deaths after a hoarding gives way on a street.
Good evening and welcome to the BBC's News at 6. The Grangemouth petrochemical plant, part of Scotland's biggest industrial site, is to be closed. 800 jobs will be lost after the owner's shock decision to call in the liquidators. It follows a bitter dispute over pay and pensions. And hundreds more jobs are still under threat tonight at the site's oil refinery, which has been shut during the dispute. The company said it hasn't yet decided whether to restart it or not. Our Scotland correspondent James Cook reports.
At 10 a.m, they filed in to hear their fate. Hundreds of workers at Scotland's largest industrial complex caught in a bitter dispute. They had been warned, accept a pay freeze and a poorer pension, or face the sack.
Absolutely devastated with this. Absolutely devastated. That's what I've got to say. It's an absolute disgrace what they've done here.
Where does that leave you?
Yeah, a job. Same as everybody else in here. Sending CVs off.
Harry Brodie has worked here for 37 years.
Disappointed, frustrated, angry. Really angry.
But subcontractors will also lose work, and they have a different take.
It's terrible. Folk are losing their jobs because people don't take a pension cut. Everybody's had to cut out in the last couple of years. Everybody's had to tighten their belt a wee bit. And a lot of subbies and that will lose their job now because INEOS will not take a pension cut.
So how did it come to this? INEOS, which owns Grangemouth, said it wanted to invest in petrochemicals here, but only if it could cut staff costs. The workers called a strike. The company pulled the plug.
Doesn't this look like vengeance?
No, not at all. It's a sad day for everybody on this site. We're certainly not punishing them, but we've got to the point now where the workers have not supported through this ballot the terms and conditions changes we want to make, which are needed for this business to survive and to get that investment.
This is the man who made the decision, Jim Ratcliffe, the billionaire owner of INEOS. He still controls Scotland's only refinery. The Grangemouth site is a tangled, complex business. It includes the petrochemical plant, which made products including plastics, and the refinery itself, which produces fuel from crude oil. The site also provides steam, which drives North Sea oil through the Forties pipeline. So what effect will this decision have?
In terms of the petrochemical plant, it's quite likely that it will be closed for good. Of course, there is a possibility that the liquidator might be able to sell the physical assets to someone else.
And the Scottish Government is leading the search for a buyer.
Yes, we've been in talks with a potential buyer, and yes, that would be a far better prospect than closure of the plant. Our priority has been, right from the start, to try and bring the sites together, to allow the investment to secure the future of the plant. That's what we're still doing and are determined to still do.
But for now, these workers face an uncertain future, and many of them are preparing for a long, bleak winter.
James, this is not just about jobs. The plant is a symbol of Scotland's industrial muscle, isn't it?
Yes, very much so, George. And the Union Unite describes what's happened here as an act of economic and industrial vandalism. And that is very much the prism through which this is being seen, as an old-style dispute between management and workers, rather than as a dispute with a necessarily political dimension. Of course, that could change if Alex Salmond can secure a buyer for the petrochemicals plant. Clearly, that would do him no harm at all. But if, on the other hand, that refinery, which is so important to Scotland, closes and it's still subject to negotiation, it would be a very different story. This dispute is not over yet.
James, thank you. David Cameron says he wants to roll back the green taxes added to household energy bills. The announcement came in a furious exchange between the Prime Minister and Ed Miliband over the rising cost of gas and electricity. Mr Cameron also said there'll be a review into whether there's proper competition between energy suppliers. Here's our political editor, Nick Robinson.
This was the day when soaring energy bills and mounting calls for government action turned the heat up under David Cameron. And it's clear he's not enjoying it.
Was John Major right on windfall tax, Prime Minister?
For weeks, the Prime Minister's dismissed calls from Labour to freeze energy bills, but he simply couldn't ignore yesterday's warning from a former Tory occupant of number 10. Hence today's rushed and surprise announcement.
We will be having a proper competition test carried out over the next year to get to the bottom of whether this market can be more competitive. I want more companies, I want better regulation, I want better deals for consumers. But yes, we also need to roll back the green charges that he put in place as Energy Secretary.
The government is scrabbling to catch up with its opponents, and boy, did Ed Miliband know it.
He really is changing his policy every day of the week. It's absolutely extraordinary. His energy secretary, who's in his place, says it's nothing to do with green taxes. 60% of the green taxes were introduced by him. And who's the man who said, vote blue to go green? It was him.
John Major agreed with him, the Labour leader said, that it was time to stand up to the energy companies. By this time, the Prime Minister was obviously losing his cool.
The difference is, John Major is a good man, the Right Honourable Gentleman is acting like a con man. That is what we're seeing. He is promising something he knows he can't deliver.
Believe it or not, there are some things you simply cannot say in the House of Commons, and that was one of them.
The word con man is frankly unparliamentary. The Prime Minister is a man of great versatility in the use of language. It's a bit below the level. We'll leave it there. It's a bit below the level.
Soaring energy prices are proving very hot to handle for David Cameron, and his mood won't have cooled down when he hears the reaction of his own Liberal Democrat coalition partners. One senior source told me the Tories have presented no properly worked up policies on this. We won't allow a panicky U-turn to dictate government policy. Ouch. So, has the government got a plan for cutting energy bills? The Prime Minister's focusing on what he says is the green part of the average bill, the £122 spent on green taxes. But the Lib Dems insist that's wrong, that only £50 of that subsidises wind and solar power, the rest is help for householders to fit things like new boilers and insulation. With the Tories wanting green taxes cut and the Lib Dems resisting, the four men who run this coalition, the so-called Quad, now face weeks of difficult negotiations.
We have been and are working hard to examine every aspect of people's energy bills. We're going to do so methodically. We're not going to make announcements on the hoof, but because we want to make sure that people aren't paying a penny more than they need to for their energy, and that we deliver those vital commitments to the environment and to green energy.
So today we got a new Prime Ministerial promise to cut energy bills. Just one thing we're waiting for though. The news of how and by how much. Nick Robinson, BBC News, Westminster.
In the last half hour, the former broadcaster Stuart Hall has been charged with 16 historic sexual offences against 2 girls. Lancashire Police has been investigating more allegations against the 83-year-old maid after he was jailed earlier this year for other sexual offences. Russia says it's dropping piracy charges against Greenpeace activists involved in the recent Arctic protest. The 30 protesters, which include 6 Britons, will instead face the lesser charge of hooliganism. They were arrested last month after activists tried to scale a Russian oil platform in the Arctic's Pechora Sea. The attack on a Kenyan shopping mall last month was one of the worst terrorist incidents of recent years, and tonight the BBC has established that 50 people from Britain have links to the organisation behind it. The group, Al-Shabaab, is based in Somalia. Our Home Affairs correspondent June Kelly has this exclusive report.
Al-Shabaab is a militant organisation with links to Al-Qaeda. In a propaganda video released last week, there was praise for jihadis said to have travelled from the UK to Somalia to fight and die for Al-Shabaab. Among them, this man, named in the film as Talha. He speaks about his roots in Tower Hamlets in East London.
All the Muslims in Britain, especially the people of Tower Hamlets, were the city that I was born in, where I call upon you to come to jihad.
The BBC has established that Talha's real name is Tufail Ahmed, and he's of Bangladeshi origin. In 2008, he left the UK to travel to Somalia. He fought with Al-Shabaab for 4 years. In 2012, he was killed. His death has been confirmed by the Foreign Office. In Tower Hamlets, we've spoken to a former schoolmate of Tufail Ahmed. He was aware of his transition from teenage gang member to political extremist and religious zealot. He doesn't want to be identified.
In gang culture, street cred is what, gives you self-worth. So for someone who's got lots of religious zeal and passion, for him to actually then make the ultimate sacrifice to go and fight on a battlefield, that would have been the ultimate street cred.
The circumstances of his death are unclear. Lawyers for his family here are now investigating uncorroborated claims that British military personnel were involved.
There are Somali eyewitnesses who identified those involved as British personnel. For those reasons, we think that further inquiries need to be made, and the family has quite legitimate questions that need to be answered.
The Ministry of Defence has declined to comment. Meanwhile, Tufail Ahmed's former schoolmate is reflecting on his death.
Many think he just wasted his life, really and truly. What did he achieve? What did he get out of it at the end of the day? Some of us certainly think he was used.
Many Britons who go abroad as jihadis are never heard of again. Now it's been established that Tufail Ahmed is among those who have died fighting for an extremist cause. June Kelly, BBC News.
A Chief Constable has told a committee of MPs that there's to be a review of a decision not to bring misconduct proceedings against 3 Police Federation officials. They're accused of trying to discredit the former Chief Whip, Andrew Mitchell. It's the latest twist in the Plebgate affair, as it's become known that has soured relations between politicians and police. Our Deputy Political Editor, James Landale, has the story.
3 policemen, a detective, a sergeant and an inspector, all accused of lying to help bring down a cabinet minister. Today they came not to court but to something similar, Parliament, and insisted they had nothing to apologise for.
I don't think we can give an apology at the moment.
Well, I suggest that you can give an apology for spinning a yarn to the press that afternoon to get someone out of high public office, because that's clearly what you were motivated to do.
I would disagree with that, sir. That is not what we were motivated to do.
You disagree with the IPCC and you disagree with the Chief Inspector of Police who said that you had misconducted yourselves. You're saying that you were completely innocent in this matter.
There was no intention to mislead. I do not feel that I lied about what went on in the meeting. There was no conspiracy to unseat Mr Mitchell.
What they're talking about is a meeting last autumn here at Andrew Mitchell's office in the West Midlands. The policemen, representatives of the Police Federation, had asked for a meeting after the then Tory Chief Whip was accused of calling officers in Downing Street plebs, something he's always denied. After the meeting, the police said Mr Mitchell hadn't told them what he said. Mr Mitchell recorded the meeting and proved that he had. Today MPs asked if the police had used the case to campaign against spending cuts.
You thought that collectively you could bring down a member of the government in penalty for what you thought was a bad policy. Mr Mackay?
Absolutely refute that suggestion.
And after all the questions, MPs were not happy with the answers.
This is not a television game show. No, this is a serious question about serious issues. Can I say on behalf of this committee that we have found your evidence most unsatisfactory?
Throughout this long, complicated saga, MPs here at Westminster have been simply incredulous that these 3 policemen haven't faced disciplinary procedures.
But today, the Chief Constable who'd made that decision told MPs that the case for misconduct proceedings would now be re-investigated.
I have already written to Mr Mitchell. I wrote to him on Monday. That has not been in the public domain before now because I thought it was important that it was a personal apology from me. and that he should receive it personally. I've taken the decision that the decision-making process should be revisited.
Yes.
And I've sought that to be done independently.
So apologies from some police today, but not all. MPs will give their verdict next week, and they're not expected to pull their punches. James Landau, BBC News, Westminster.
And the time is nearly 16 minutes past 6. Our top story this evening. 800 jobs to go as one of Scotland's largest industrial plants closes. And still to come. 5 more minutes, please. Traffic wardens are asked to give motorists a little bit of leeway.
Coming up in Sports Day on BBC News, after Sir Alex Ferguson's book launch, Manchester United's focus returns to football with a hugely important European night for David Moyes at Old Trafford.
A school in Gloucestershire has been forced to close after an invasion of venomous spiders. They're from the false widow species and they've been crawling their way across southern England. The spider's bite can cause pain, swelling and nausea. The species has long been established along the south coast of England from Cornwall to Essex, but now more and more of them are being found inland and further north. Our correspondent John Kay has been finding out more.
School's out for spiders. At the Dean Academy, no lessons today. The only uniforms have been worn by pest control officers who've spent the day fumigating classrooms. And this is what they're trying to eradicate. The false widow spider, which has been found in several areas of the school. A week before Halloween, this surprise day off school has been a reality check for pupils.
I was a bit scared at first because I didn't know what kind of spider it was, and to be truthful, I'm not really a big fan of spiders.
I was quite shocked actually to hear that she was having a day off school for spiders.
I'm not complaining. I like the spiders now, but I wouldn't pick one up.
That's it, what you like them because they're giving you a day off?
Yeah.
It was like someone had literally stabbed me in the back.
Steve Harris definitely doesn't like them. He was bitten by a false widow spider in Devon last week and had such an extreme reaction he needed an emergency operation.
By the 4th day it had gone completely black on top and I was struggling to move, and that I'd been to the doctor, they gave me antibiotics, they weren't working. I had still quite a lot of pain there, so I got taken to hospital.
Whoops, there he goes.
This spider expert who lives near the school says he has received more reports of false widows this year, but he thinks it's mainly down to increased media coverage and some sensational headlines. He says the spiders themselves are not lethal and there's no need to panic.
It's very slow moving, it's not aggressive, and if you got bitten by it, then you're very unlucky.
The school says it only closed after taking expert advice. Tonight we did find an 8-legged visitor at the entrance, but we're told this one is nothing to worry about.
They hope the school gates will reopen by tomorrow morning. In the meantime, the checks will go on for some time yet. John Kay, BBC News, the Forest of Dean in Gloucestershire.
A court-martial heard today how a Royal Marine on active duty in Afghanistan shot dead an injured Afghan 2 years ago. The man was shot in the chest with a pistol at close range, with the incident captured on a helmet-mounted camera. The commander and 2 other Marines deny murder. Our defence correspondent Caroline Wyatt was in court. Caroline, give us the background to this case.
Well, the 3 Royal Marines on trial here for murder were first discovered when a video was found on one of their computers by civilian police, and then the RMP looked into this. The 3 are having their identities concealed. They're called A, B and C, and the prosecution began with that video you mentioned. It was shown, the helmet camera, which showed the 3 moving the Afghan insurgent who lay injured and disarmed on the ground. One Marine suggests shooting him in the head. The other was seen by the court saying that's too obvious. Then Marine A was shown with a pistol in his hand, aiming at the insurgent's chest. There is a shot. A says, there, shuffle off your mortal coil, it's nothing you wouldn't do to us. And then, obviously, fellas, this doesn't go anywhere. I've just broken the Geneva Convention. The trial continues.
Caroline, thank you. A pensioner who repeatedly raped a deaf and mute girl he trafficked into the UK when she was just 10 years old has been sentenced to 13 years in Pakistani girl to work as a servant in his home in Salford. His wife Talat Asha, who was also jailed for 5 years for trafficking and exploitation. Judith Moritz reports from Manchester Crown Court.
Down these steps, a child was kept out of sight for nearly a decade. This cellar room is where the girl slept and worked and was subjected to repeated rapes. She was attacked by Ilyas Ashar, who's now 84. He'd trafficked the girl from Pakistan into Britain with his wife Talat. The pensioners controlled the girl, who couldn't hear or speak and whose date of birth is unknown. It's thought she was as young as 10 when she was brought to the couple's house in Salford. There they beat her and used her for forced labour. The Ashars and their daughter also used the girl's identity to fraudulently claim more than £35,000.
Exploited her financially, claiming her benefits, exploited her sexually, physically abused her, and of course used her as unpaid slave labour.
The Ashars sold cars and used the girl to wash them. Neighbours say they have no idea that she was being forced to work.
I may have seen her outside, you know, because there's always washing cars and things like that outside. You know, it seemed, you know, I may have seen her, but I felt really sorry for her. You know, a child at that age being in there for so long.
Judge Peter Lakin described this as a deeply disturbing case. Sentencing the Ashars, he told them, "You didn't treat this girl as a human being. You took advantage of her extreme vulnerability, and you consigned her to a life of misery and degradation." Judith Moritz, BBC News, Manchester Crown Court.
Councils in England should not use parking to raise money for local services. That's according to an influential committee of MPs. The Transport Select Committee says motorists whose parking tickets have run out should be given 5 minutes grace. Jeremy Cook reports from Leeds.
Leeds city centre, a social and business hub, but for many, a parking nightmare.
Andy, you just got a ticket, man.
Here and across the country, there's a choice: pay and display, or pay the fine.
£1 for 20 minutes. It's just too much.
£5 for 2 hours, something like that?
Yep. Yeah, that's right. And if you nip off to go get change from somewhere because you've got no change, you end up with a £50 fine.
Traffic wardens were supposed to be the motorists' friends.
In training to keep the traffic flowing.
But now councils